And now the continuation. The family I saved from drowning has all disappeared. The new family has been born. I know that by the shape of her, though I haven't seen any of them yet. I don't even see her husband. This friendship is a personal thing between her and me. I think perhaps I am going to succeed. About a month ago, I made 2 boxes. They're both more or less the same, though not identical. They're very rough. I'm not a carpenter by any standards. The boxes have lids with bits of an old strap acting as hinges. The lids aren't fastened in any way. Every night I've been putting the food I bring into one or other of these boxes. Every night I point to one box and say, "Food." For the last 3 nights, she's gone straight to the box with the food in it. I'll go on doing this for another week without any change. After that, I'll start pointing to each of the boxes in turn. As I point to one, I shall say, "Food." When I point to the other, I shall say, "Empty." I don't know how long I've been at the new system now. Probably nearly 2 months. At last, I think I may be getting somewhere. At first, I couldn't tell if she was paying any attention to what I said or not. Once, she went to the right box 3 nights running. The following 4 nights, she went to the wrong one. What makes me think she has begun to listen is that for the past week or so, I've noticed her watching my face, waiting for me to speak, before she goes to either box. Of course, she might be lip reading. That would be a strange thing, but perhaps not unlikely. I make a great difference in the way I pronounce the 2 words. I say MT in a harsh, unattractive voice, but when I say food, it's in a soft, caressing tone. Food. Certainly it's working, but where do I go from here? Incidentally, Ma's at her 3rd family since I first got to know her. Very strange. Ma appears to have had a family of 1, or else something's happened to the others. Stranger still, she brought this one along this evening and introduced him. It was more than an introduction. You would almost have thought she was giving him to me. There is something about him that is odd. I can't help feeling that he is human. He is not frightened of me at all. When Ma brought him along, he looked at me, shyly perhaps, but with no sign of fear. He looked at me as a friendly and intelligent boy might look at a new tutor, who he has been told is very kind. Of course, I don't really know that he is a male. I am convinced he is on absolutely no evidence. I have no idea how you tell the difference between male and female rats. I have called him Socrates. I thought of Samuel by a peculiar sort of association of ideas, but Socrates is better. He looks so wise. Socrates, I would say, is less than half grown. That is to say, he is less than half the size of Ma. I don't know what age that would make him, but judging by the time since the last family departed, I don't think he can be more than 6 weeks old. He is handsome. The fur on his back is dark brown and glossy. His paws and chest and all his underpart are white. He is very clean. His eyes seem a little larger than those of the other rats I have seen, and seem to have a sort of gleam of intelligence. This may be my imagination. I'm not sure if eyes are capable of expression. His ears move all the time. When he is looking at me and listening to me, his whole expression is alert and bright. At present, his tail is pinkish and much thinner than his mother's. I don't find it repulsive looking. Perhaps it will get fat and scaly when he grows up. He knows his name already. It only took him about 15 minutes to learn it, and funnily enough, Ma learned her name at the same time. I just call her Ma. Socrates has already learned to pick out the full and the empty box. This all in one evening. I mean, it's only this evening that I saw him for the first time, but I changed my method a little. Instead of saying food, MT, I changed to food and no food. I intend to go on to lots of other things in the same way, water and no water, and so on. Ma didn't appear tonight, only Socrates. Ma is about due for another family. She seems to have one about every 6 weeks. What happens to them, all I can't imagine. Socrates learns extraordinarily quickly. First thing tonight, I tried him to see if he remembered food and no food. It was quite clear that he did. I tried him several times, changing the food from one box to another without letting him see. Every time he went to the box, I told him the food was in. Next, I tried to teach him the word box. I touched one box after the other and said, boxes. I think he understands, but it's impossible to know. If he were a child, he would repeat the words after me, but I can't expect that. All I'm trying to do is to make him understand what I say, not to make him talk back at me. I ought to be able to think out some system. I suppose I'm stupid, but I can't really think out any system. I just keep talking all the time I'm with him. I'm sure some of it sticks to his brain, but I don't know how much. I say, I, me, man, and point at myself. I say, you, rat, and point at him. I got a trowel from the tool shed and dug a small hole near the pool in the rockery. I said, I dig hole, me dig hole, man dig hole, I, me, man dig hole. That was while I was digging. When I had finished, I pointed to the hole and said several times, hole, hole, man-made hole. Socrates looked at me and he looked at the hole. He seemed to understand. Suddenly, I had an inspiration. Rat hole, I said. Sure enough, he scampered away to the hole under the juniper bush. Manhole, I called after him, and he came scurrying back to the hole I had made. Well, that proved that he did understand, and that he learns extraordinarily quickly. But of course, I've taught him one word wrongly. I'll have to try to teach him what a manhole really is. Socrates' tail isn't pink anymore. It's covered with fine hairs, like a sort of brown fuzz. Tonight I set off with Socrates in my pocket to find a manhole. There are really quite a lot of manholes, but they all seem to be in the middle of roads. Eventually, I got one in what I thought was a quiet place and put Socrates down on it so that he could sniff around and see what it was. The next thing I knew, there was a screaming of brakes, and here was a car coming straight at us. I dived down, grabbed Socrates, and shoved him under my jacket. But I hadn't time to jump for the side of the road before the car skidded past sideways, making a dreadful noise. I got an awful fright and felt very cross. But what do you think happened? The car stopped facing into the ditch, sideways onto the road, but no harm done. The chap jumped out almost before it had stopped and come tearing over to me. as if there wasn't a moment to lose. I thought he was going to apologize for nearly running me down, but not a bit of him. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he said. "I wasn't doing anything," I told him. "Well, for God's sake, go and do it somewhere else." "You're damn lucky I didn't kill you. You were driving far too fast," I retorted. "You ought to be more careful." He was going to hit me. I don't think I'm a coward, though I certainly would never want to get into a fight if I could help it. But I simply couldn't fight at that moment. I still had Socrates clasped under my jacket. I hadn't had time to put him into my pocket. At the first blow, the man might easily have hit him, perhaps even killed him, and I didn't dare to put him down. The man would then have tried to kill him. So I just turned round and ran away as hard as I could, belt. After I'd got my 50 yards, I realized he wasn't coming after me. I turned to see what he was doing. "You're Yeller," he shouted. "Yeller yourself," I shouted back. "Why haven't you got your L plates up?" He nearly went purple at that. "You wait," he roared. "I'll get you yet." He rushed back towards the car, where 2 or 3 of his pals had got out and were standing around. Obviously, he intended to come after me in the car, and his pals with him, so I nipped off across the field and got home quickly by the back way before he had time to see where I was going. I hope all the same I don't meet him somewhere else. The fur on Socrates' tail has got quite thick. I had an unpleasant time in the office today. My salary has been the same ever since before Father died. 10 years and not a single rise. Mother's been at me time after time to go and see Jones, and as she calls it, demand my rights. She's got an idea that because Father once owned the place, some sort of hereditary vested interests must have descended to me. She quite ignores the fact that we had to sell out every share Father possessed to Jones. It wasn't just Jones himself, of course. He hadn't much money at that time. He managed to get someone to back him. Mother feels we sold out for too little. In a way, she's right. But the business was doing badly for several years before Father's death, and I could never have made a go of it. I know I'm not a businessman, and never will be. I suppose Mother knows too, but every now and then she tries to pump what she calls ambition into me. Ambition. As if I ever wanted to be a person like Jones. At any rate, she got me to promise to see Jones and ask for a rise. If you can't open your mouth and ask for a rise, you're never going to get anywhere, she said, probably truly. Not that I really want to get anywhere that I know of. I just want to stay where I am and have people leave me alone. I waited till after Jones had done the checks. CHEQEES, cukes or checks, at 11:30. Then I said, "I wonder if I could speak to you in private for a minute, Mr. Jones." I don't call him sir. After all, as Mother says, it really should be him calling me sir. "All right," he said, "but better make it snappy. I haven't much time to waste." That made me nervous to start with. I don't know whether he did it on purpose or not. All the staff say he's terrified of anyone asking for a rise. He's only made the place pay by cutting all the expenses to a minimum. All except his own salary. I know what that is. He's doubled it since Father died. Oh, he's doing well enough. But all the same, everyone says it really does upset him to be asked for a rise. I'm pretty sure it's raise, but it's spelled R-I-S-E here in the book. It's strange. He feels that if everyone got a rise, the place would start losing money again. And then where'd he be? He's a great one for saving the pence, though you wouldn't say exactly that he lets the pounds look after themselves. When any of the staff want to speak to him in private, he knows it's 10 to 1. It's a rise thereafter. He can't very well refuse to see them, but that's what he'd like to do. I followed him into his private office, father's office, really. I can't think of it any other way. He didn't sit down or ask me to. That would have looked as if he had time to talk. Well, what is it? Please, Mr. Jones, I was wondering if you could see your way to increase my salary. He interrupted me before I could get any further, shaking his head and putting on a most mournful expression. I'm sorry, things have got very tight. We're having a terrible job making ends meet. We couldn't manage it all, but I haven't had a rise since Father died, and everything's getting dearer and dearer. Another shake of his head. No one knows that better than me. Cost rising the whole time. It's the devil's own job making a profit. And besides, you're getting more than any cashier we've ever had before. You should be very comfortably off, living out there with your mother, unmarried, and your own house. I've got a position to keep up. This was a thing Mother told me to say. I didn't like it very much, but I knew she'd ask me when I got home. What position? Well, Father's son and all that. He sneered. You can't go through life being Father's son. The sooner you get that into your head, the better. And if I might give you another bit of advice, when I'm at it, you should sell that house you live in. It's far too big for the two of you, and too expensive. You'd get on a lot better if you moved to somewhere smaller. Now, get back to your work. You may be thankful you got a job, and a well-paid one at that, considering all you're asked to do. Next moment, I was in the passage again, wondering how I'd got there. I went back to my desk in the cash office. When I tried to write, I found my hands shaking. I couldn't do anything for 10 or 15 minutes. I hate Jones. I dreaded going home. I knew Mother'd be at me. And sure enough, as soon as we sat down to tea, she started up. Had I spoken to Jones? What had he said? Why hadn't I told him this and that? I told her as little as I could. Why she has to keep bludgeoningly away at me, I don't know. She should realize by this time that I'm never going to be any good by her standards or anyone else's, I suppose. I wish she'd accept the fact that I'm a failure and not keep probing me for details. It's not going to do any good. I am ashamed of myself, of being no more than I am. I am ashamed of what happened today with Jones. I hated telling her about it. I hate thinking about it. I hate Mother for having driven me to demand an interview with him. If she'd left me alone, I'd never have said a word. Most of all, I hate Jones. As soon as we got the washing up done, I escaped out into the garden. Where are you away to now? Mother called after me, but I pretended not to hear. It was dark. I went up the path to the tool shed. I've an old hurricane lamp there. I lit it and waited. I had an overcoat on, so I wasn't cold. Not the coat I go to the office in, but an old one of Father's, which is far better quality and warmer than anything I could afford. The tool shed is just the same as it always was. I used to like coming here on rainy days when I was a child, and talking to the gardener. The funny thing is that it still has the same smell as I remember it having in those days. A smell of dry earth, perhaps, and some chemical. Lime? Bone meal? I don't know. I don't even know what bone meal is. Ground down bones, I suppose. There I was anyhow, looking at the spades and forks hanging against the wall, a bit rusty perhaps, but pretty much the way they were in old William's day. The old Pennsylvania lawnmower in the corner behind the door, and there was Socrates, peering out at me from a hole beneath the bench. "Socrates," I said, "I've had a beastly day." He came right out and hopped up a sort of a staircase I've made out of old boxes onto the bench. Of course, I'd a few scraps for him in my pocket, but for a long time I just stood there stroking him, mostly with one finger. It soothed me somehow doing this. I began to feel at peace, at ease. After a while, Ma appeared with her latest family. I've taught them to understand a few things already, and of course Socrates is a great help. He acts as a sort of school teacher. They do a few tricks to order. One of them is to tear up a newspaper. I had one with me tonight, just to see them at it. I unfolded one sheet and put it on the bench. "Tear it up," I said. They certainly did. You should have seen the fury of them. It made me laugh. They tore it to shreds. "Stop," I said, and they stopped just like that. Then I had an idea. If they would tear up paper to command, why not other things? Why not motor tires, for instance? Why not Jones's motor tires? Of course, motor tires are a lot tougher than paper. But if they went for the sides of the tires when they're not so thick, people who make me suffer should suffer in return. "Where do you go to every night?" Mother asked me. "You can't be working in the garden at this time of year. You couldn't see to work." Sometimes I tell her one thing, sometimes another. "I'm going out for a walk," I told her one night. "Need a bit of exercise after being stuck in the office all day." It was after 11 when I came back, but she had waited up for me. "Have a nice walk?" "Oh yes, very nice. It's a lovely frosty night. The sky's quite clear. It's almost as bright as day in the moonlight. I didn't hear the gate creak when you went out. No, I left it open when I came back from the office. She can't catch me out though, she's always trying. I've begun to enjoy lying to her. Sometimes I lie to her when it's not necessary. Your father always insisted on the gate being kept shut to keep the dogs out. They make a mess of the lawn." She means they make messes on the lawn. "They can get in, whether the gate's shut or not," I said. "The hedge is full of holes. They can get in anywhere they like, but your father had wire netting put all around the hedge on the inside. I remember it cost quite a lot of money. It's all rusted away." Quite often I tell her the truth. I've just been up at the tool shed, but she doesn't believe me. It might as well be another lie. "What do you do up at the tool shed?" "I sit there." "You can't just sit there for 2 hours doing nothing." "Yes, I like it there." "It must be cold out." "You'd be far better sitting with me in the house, or do you find my company unbearable?" "No, I like sitting with you too." She doesn't know what to make of me. She thinks I have a girl, or a woman rather, not the sort of woman I could introduce to her. All the same, she longs to meet her. I imagine she wants to pour out a denunciation of sin and bring me back to repentant, to the fold. She's very odd about it. I think she respects me more now. She thinks I'm a sinner than she did when she looked on me as an innocent lamb. She keeps saying it's about time I got married, but she doesn't really want me to marry. Not that there's the slightest chance. No girl would look at me twice, not unless she was desperate. Not even then. Girls have a great nose for money. They have to have. They're like cats, prowling round to find the best place to have kittens. When father was alive, I used sometimes to notice girls running their eyes over me, but it never came to anything. I remember one of them telling me that she thought I would suit her best friend, but most of them didn't even think I was up to that standard. I don't know how they knew. Nowadays, they don't even give me a second glance. It's not that I'm not attracted to them. They'd upset my life just as much as any other man's if I didn't watch myself. If there was just the sexual act, overdone within 5 minutes, I wouldn't mind. It's the preliminaries and the consequences I won't put up with. Why should I? Why be a slave? It's easy to let off steam when you have to. It's strange how obedient they are. I can see that tearing up newspapers might be fun, and there's no doubt rats are playful, but fancy tearing up motor tires with your teeth. The secret, of course, is that they tear very little at a time, and it's not just teeth. It's teeth and claws. The claws go like furry. Doing Jones's tires is going to be quite a thing. I will have to plan every detail like a military operation. Jones lives at the other end of town. The difficulty is going to be getting the rats there. I should like to take 12 as well as Socrates. Another difficulty. A thing like this should be rehearsed time after time, till there is no possibility of mistake. I can't rehearse, not the actual assault, and that's going to be the tricky part. I feel I have got to be very careful. Rats are regarded as enemies of man. Even the sentimentalists don't protest about killing rats. They're not like the bunnies and the sweet little hares and the foxes. The reason is that everyone's scared stiff of them. In my lifetime, I've known people have more or less the same feeling about Germans and Japs. Now it's communists and Chinese. The best rat is a dead rat. I wonder if rats could be a danger to the whole human race. They might be if there was a struggle for survival after a nuclear war. They breed so quickly, they might be able to reproduce before succumbing to atomic sickness. If I had a rehearsal, it could only be by attacking the tires of some other car. Once one car has been done, everyone is going to be on the alert. There will be rat traps in garages and all sorts of things. I have no desire to ruin any other person's tires, only Jones's. In particular, I don't want to try anything near home. One part I have been able to rehearse. I have been getting my team accustomed to traveling about in a suitcase. Of course, I put Socrates in with them to keep them in order. He will be like the trainer traveling with the team. I suppose I'm the manager. First of all, I just carried them about the garden. It was comic. I could feel them scurrying about inside the case. I had to say, "Quiet! Keep still!" It didn't have much effect. I took them back to the shed. It's going to take a bit more training to accustom them to the idea that once they're in the case, they must stay absolutely quiet and still till I let them out again. I couldn't go on the bus with a case and have all sorts of squeaks and squeals coming from inside. People would look at me, especially if I seemed to be talking to my suitcase. I am having to change the team a bit. The best gnawers and clawers are not necessarily the most disciplined. I wouldn't know which ones to leave out if it wasn't for Socrates. When they come out of the box, he snaps at the ones which have been giving trouble. One thing has been bothering me. They have been practicing on some old tire covers that were hanging up on the walls of our garage. Relics of the days when we had a car. Jones's tires will have air in them. As soon as the rats get through to the tube, there'll be a frightful hissing. Is that going to frighten the whole lot off? It doesn't matter if it frightens the ones that have got through, but I don't want it to start a general panic. I want to make sure he finds 4 flat tires first thing in the morning, not just one. I bought a packet of children's balloons. I blow them up and let the air come hissing out while the rats are at the tires. I've also burst 1 or 2. They're getting accustomed to all sorts of noises. Whatever happens now, they just go on. That's discipline for you. This evening, I made rather a funny discovery. I said goodnight to Mother and went up to my room in the usual way. As soon as I switched on the light, the bulb went phut, like that. I went down to the cupboard under the stairs where we keep spare bulbs, but there were none left. I wondered for a moment and then decided to borrow the bulb from what used to be the maid's room. On the top floor at the back, it hadn't been used for years, or so I thought. I went up, left the landing light on and the door open, but didn't at first put on the light in the room itself. Then it struck me that the arrangement of the room was rather odd, so I put on the light. There was a deck chair with cushions on it in the window, and on a table beside the chair, Father's old field glasses. Mother has been spying on me. Well, let her spy. It's not going to do me any harm, and if she catches her death of cold, it's her lookout. I took the bulb from the box room instead. I don't want her to know I know. It might only lead to a fresh crop of questions and bogus explanations by me. As it is, I don't think she'll see anything. Even if she did notice a rat occasionally, it wouldn't interest her. What she's expecting is a female form flitting guiltily in or out of the tool shed door. All the same, I'll stick a bit of paper over the window of the tool shed. That'll both convince her of the rightness of her suspicions and make it less likely that she should see the rats. I wonder how long she's been at it. Now I come to think of it, I came in rather a hurry one night about a month ago and found her on the first landing with her coat and hat on, all dressed to go out in fact. "You're not going out?" I said. "It's frightfully cold." No, I'm not going out." "You've not been out?" No, and then after a rather embarrassed pause, I put my coat and hat for a little. "Is there any harm in that?" Mother would never tell a direct lie, but she has no compunction about leading you to believe what isn't true. And it's wonderful what old people can get away with. I simply thought, poor old Mother is getting old and a bit queer. And I wondered how long it would be before I had to get her put in one of these old people's homes. Quite a relief when the time comes. I'd just as soon have the house to myself. But I'm sure she'll fight tooth and nail to stay on here. Today I went over to have a look at Jones's house. There is nothing very special about it. It's not as big a house as ours, and it hasn't nearly as much garden, but of course it's where it is that matters. Jones lives in the best neighborhood, in among the local tycoons. That's another way of saying he's got a lot of uncaught crooks around him. He's in his element. Everything about the house and garden is neat, tidy, and smart, just the way our place used to look when Father was alive. Not that Jones would need a gardener for all the bit of garden he has. Probably he and the wife took after it on Saturday afternoons. If so, you might say it's a credit to him. Why people want to spend their time grubbing about in gardens just to impress the neighbors, I don't know. The garage is beside the house, though not actually part of it. When I first arrived, it was standing open with the car inside. Obviously, I couldn't hang about outside. Jones might have come out and seen me. So I walked past quickly close to the hedge. To begin with, I had only that one glance through the gateway, because the hedge is high and too thick to be seen through. This was an advantage in a way. I didn't want him peering out of his drawing room window and seeing me. I walked quickly on up the avenue and on into another avenue. I didn't want anyone to notice me. I don't think anyone did. I was just a chap out for a walk. I came back again about an hour and a half later. It was dusk, nearly dark. The garage door was shut and bolted. Going past quickly, not appearing to look in, I couldn't make out if there was a padlock on it or not. I didn't turn and have another look. Instead, I went for another little walk and came back when it was quite dark. I was nervous and excited. I could feel my heart beating. No one to see me now. I opened one half of the gate, an iron gate, but it didn't even squeak. I stood for a little inside the gate, in the shadow where the light from the street lamp didn't shine on me. The house looked rather bigger than in daylight, rather vague and mysterious. There was only light in one room, the drawing room, I suppose. Jones is careful with his money, no waste. Of course, I still couldn't see if there was a lock on the garage door or not. I couldn't really see the garage door at all. I stole in a little further on tiptoe. Crunch, crunch. They must spend a fortune on gravel, these people. I skipped onto the grass. That was better. I reached the garage door with hardly any more noise. I felt it with my hands. It's a wooden door with a bolt and padlock. Jones looks after his own. Suddenly, there was a shriek behind me. I nearly died on the spot. It went through me as if my bowels had suddenly been snatched out and hurled into deep freeze. It was Jones's daughter. Fortunately, she didn't see my face. I was too frightened to turn round. I stood there, frozen, one hand on the lock. I'd been going to give a good tug to see if it would come off. After a moment during which both the girl and I stood absolutely still, she ran up to the front door shouting, "Daddy! Come quick! There's a man trying to steal the car!" I came to life at that and tore away as fast as I could. I wasn't sure which way to go. If I came dashing onto the main road, a lot of people might see me and be able to point me out if the whole Jones family and all the neighbors came pouring after me in full hue and cry. Instead, I went away from the main road, running on my toes as fast as I could. I knew there was a cross avenue about 50 yards away. I turned into this and stopped running. I sauntered along slowly as if I hadn't a care in the world. I took the next turn to the right and came back to the main road about 150 yards higher up than Jones's Avenue. There was a bus stop opposite. A bus to the city center had just pulled away from it. I hadn't a hope of catching it. There aren't many buses on that route, but I was opposite an avenue which leads down to another main bus route about half a mile away. Crossing the road, I would be in full view of anyone who might come out of Jones's Avenue. On the other hand, anyone who noticed me where I was, lurking in the shadow of the hedge, would immediately become suspicious. I walked baldly across the road. I couldn't make up my mind what to do. I was half tempted to nip into one of the gardens and lie low for a while. But if I were caught in somebody's garden, it would look very suspicious. I'd be brought along for Miss Jones to identify, and even if nothing could be proved, Jones would give me the sack first thing in the morning. He'd have every right to. After all, I'm cashier in the firm. No one could be expected to entrust money to a person caught lurking in somebody else's garden at night. I stood at the bus stop for about half a minute. I felt horribly obvious. There didn't seem to be another soul about. Anyone looking for a young man of medium height and slim build would immediately spot me. Once Jones saw me, he'd want to know what I was doing at this end of town. It would be no good saying I had been visiting friends. The police would want to know what friends. And if I said I'd just been out for a walk, that would sound pretty thin. There are plenty of good walks about home. I lost my nerve and began to walk down the avenue that leads to the other bus route. I heard a car behind me. A big car. A police car? I expected it to pull up beside me and policemen to jump out and start questioning me. I still had no idea what to say. The car went on. It wasn't a police car. It wasn't even particularly big. Then it came to me. What to say, I mean. I had been seeing a girl. No, I was not prepared to say who she was. I'd get away with that, all right. Everyone would believe me straight away, and Jones would think I was far more of a lad than he'd ever imagine. I walked on, but no one stopped me. I caught a bus on the other road and reached home safely without further adventure. To be continued again.